Hello and welcome to the fifth webinar for the Automation Academy. This one is titled Mastering the Machine. We'll be talking to Doug Alward from Wright Industries, a senior applications engineer, about quoting in applications and getting a little bit into the Steam controller and some other topics. Hope you enjoy it. Hello, phone number person. So I don't have a name appearing here, but this is somebody on a telephone.
Hey guys, this is Phil Scruggs calling in from a phone.
Okay, hey Phil, how you doing? And we have
Doing pretty good. I'm excited to hear what you have to say today.
Cool, yeah, it's going to be fun. So Doug Alward's on here also, and someone else just joined here, Lalit. And so I'm just curious, can you guys see this little picture here off to the right of the slides? There's a picture of four of us sitting here.
Yeah, it's visible.
It is visible?
Yes.
Okay, interesting. I'm going to move it so we don't have to look at ourselves. It actually puts the picture of whoever's speaking in the corner anyway. And I'm going to try to, let's see, I'm going to maximize that. And we're going to get started on the webinar. So this is the webinar for the 22nd of January 2021, and I've titled it Mastering the Machine, which has a little story behind it. And part of this has to do with some of the members of the Automation Academy have requested that I do more on systems integration, machine building, that sort of thing. And I didn't really know how to do it because it covers so many different aspects of integration that and the problem with the Automation Academy is I have PLC classes and I have HMI classes and things like that. And so I mentioned that here. The Automation Academy has been categorized into PLC and HMI training, which is kind of where I got started. Career guidance, it has a library, community groups and things. But if I create these topics, it's so many different topics that I would have to scatter them into different courses. So rather than putting them into different courses, I have decided to put them into one course. And I've actually already released that one course. It's a course or series called Mastering the Machine. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that because I have the first module out. So where did the name come from? Way back in 2013, I created a document called Mastering the Machine, and I used it as what is called a lead magnet. So a lead magnet or opt-in incentive is a slimy way for people to get your email address. People download it for free off of a website, and you have to enter your email to get it. And then I have a way to spam you with lots and lots of emails, right? The only problem is I don't do that. I'm not good at doing that. And so all the way from 2013, I collected these names. I sent out a welcome email, but I didn't do anything with it, right? So I never sent further emails, and I collected the names, and they didn't really accomplish anything. So that's where this came from. And then feedback from members said there was interest in getting into systems integration, so I decided to name it after that, right? The Mastering the Machine document. And so there is a course or a series on the Automation Academy called Mastering the Machine, and it has a little icon like that, and I just stuck some pictures of projects I've done in the past. Doug, do you no, you may not recognize this. Do you know what that is a picture of?
Is that the filter line?
Not the filter line. This is the McClelland Automation e-cigarette line, which you guys worked on some, right?
Yes.
So little known fact, I was actually in Manchester, and I was their controls engineering manager for all of a month or two. And the reason was they had so many contractors. This company went from 30 employees to 200 in maybe a couple months, right? So they didn't have a way to manage that growth. So Lisa Ryle, I forget her full name, but anyway, she contracted me to come in and manage the controls enterprise and basically put together a template and say, we're going to follow this template. right? Because they had these contractors coming in from everywhere. And then after that, gosh, Automation Tool, Wright Industries, all got involved in that. So I was actually up there on the other end while Doug was at Wright still, you know, and he probably didn't know that I'm on the other end of all that, but Wright did a lot of the building of those machines, right? So McClellan was this little company that got a contract from R.J. Reynolds and had to build these e-cigarette lines when the e-cigarettes were getting popular. And so they were way too small to do something like that. I think they're since maybe even out of business. And, you know, so they kind of imploded after that. But I was actually contracted to go in there and try to help organize them on the front end. So that's a little bit of history.
Yeah, in fact, Mark Ross and Roger Norty.
Yep.
And Mr. Masick all went to work for them prior to their closing.
Yeah, so Mark Ross was up there, and I met him there, and then he went to Automation Tool, I think, after that.
Yes.
Yeah, so
yeah,
interesting.
Roger went to ATS, yep.
Yep, so these guys are all, you know, kind of or Mark Ross was mechanical. He was actually the mechanical engineering manager at Wright when I got there. And then things have, you know, there's a lot of management changes in all these companies, but it's funny how everybody knows everybody. Let's see. So show you a little bit about what the first Mastering the Machine episode was about. I'm going to drag this over here. So I went out to a company close to here. It's a couple hours away, and I can't really talk about who the company is for confidentiality reasons, but I did a plant automation analysis for them. And this was just a couple weeks ago. As a matter of fact, I think I went out there on the 12th and I wrote this report for them. And since people have been asking me, how do you quote machines? How do you get into that? This was a preliminary study before the quote even happens. So I made my first module about that. It is a 20 or how many pages? 19-page document evaluating their automation potential, right? So that's kind of how that worked. And I talked about all the processes that go on there. I described the process. It's basically soup in a bag, and it's hot soup, so they have to cool it down. It comes out of the machine. It goes into a bath. You can see a little bit of the bath back here. And I describe all that in here. And then it comes out of the bath and kind of dries off. But even though they put it in one at a time, it comes out in a giant clump in a big old pile. So, but at this point, it's gone from 170 degrees down to 110 degrees. So it's cooled off. And then they manually pack these into boxes. And I describe all that in here. And then I describe the plant, and I say the idea is to pack the boxes in these load areas and then somehow get them over to these freezers and shove them into the freezers. That's what they do. They freeze those boxes of soup, then they palletize them. This is what they have to do to get them in the freezers, though. So they stack all these boxes on this cart, and they manually push them into the freezer, and the cart weighs 1,300 pounds. And their problem is that they go through operators, right? Because 1,300 pounds is a very heavy cart. And so the operators are in a hot room where all the soup is and they're packing, and then they push it into a cold room. And in the summer, you can imagine how that would be pretty tough. You're pushing heavy stuff, the wheels get jammed, all kinds of things. They have 600 of these carts. There's a guy in the freezer with one of the carts. And so they do all this manually right now. Then they take them out of the freezer, they put a lid on the box, they band the box, and they palletize it manually. So there are some automated things in there, amazingly, right? So this is not really automation, right? That's just a pallet wrapper. But they do have a giant storage and retrieval system that's all automated, right? 10 stories tall. Giant warehouses, lots and lots of automation on that end of it, right? And then what I did is I made a list of the operations. This is for my own internal use, and I divided them up into applications 1 through 5. Here we got somebody else showing up. So, I divided them up into these applications. These are pretty arbitrary from my 2-hour visit there. This is the kind of stuff that I wrote down. as far as their process. A lot of it's manual, as you can see. Then I did some drawings. I said, this is what the process looks like, right? And this is just a little kind of a cartoon drawing of them packaging the soup, running it up a conveyor into the bath, and manually packing it on a table. And then I use these same little cartoons to talk about my proposals. Well, as you saw in that one picture, this is in a big pile. So the only way I see to get stuff out of the pile, and I gave them two solutions. I said, you can take these bags and you could run it on a speed up conveyor and maybe separate them and maybe orient them similar to a vibratory bowl or something. But you could also simply use a robot, vision guided robot, put a pad on it, a vacuum pad, and pick the bags up. And there happens to be somebody right there in that town that does that. They do vision guided robots. They actually sell little workstations. So they'd be a good option for that. So I'm giving them general ideas, right? None of this is quoting. So the next step would be, yes, they need to examine all these ideas and figure out how are they going to approach their vendors and get quotes, which is more of what Doug does and talks about. And then how do you design those systems out of that? So that's application one. Application two, again, very generic. I said you could, once you've packed the box, you could take it on a conveyor, put it on some kind of little gantry and load the existing carts. Now, that does not address how do I get the cart into the room, which is a different application, right? So I wheel it down the hall or whatever. Well, that's where I came up with the idea of sending this up a elevator, basically, like a conveyor, and then stick it on another conveyor, overhead conveyor, and just carry the trays individually to the freezer. I like this idea because it gets rid of the carts entirely in that packing, right? And then you send the trays and you unpack them on the other end, you send them down an elevator, and then you have to still decide, do I want to put these on carts or do I want to somehow automatically load the freezer? And then I address some of those things. So there's a map of where would I put all of these, conveyors and things. So I took the existing map and showed where some of these things would be. So they gave me an AutoCAD drawing, so that's kind of handy. There we go, and we got Phil coming in on the visible side. There we go. And so this is just superimposed over the existing drawing. So one of the things about this is I didn't get paid a lot to do this little study. They didn't want to, they just wanted to see the feasibility of it. So I put all this stuff in here, but didn't spend a lot of time Cadillacing it, right? Then I said, how do I get the freezer racks, right? Whether you load them in the freezer area or you load them over here and drive them. And this is where you have to get into some kind of an AGV. And I did some investigation on this, and there are AGVs and then there are AGCs, which are automated guided carts. The cart would drive under the rack, pick it up, and move it into the freezer. So these are pretty common. They follow tracks in the floor. They sometimes are almost GPS guided, a lot of different ways to do this. Now, when I was doing this, I mentioned some of the things about automated guided carts that you have to look at, but I ran into this company, which was really cool. I think I'm even going to bring this up and just show you a little video if it shows up. Let's see, there we go, control click, and this will bring it up on another page. But I want to show you this little video. The bad thing about this company is they're in Israel. They do not, they have a one-page website. Oh, maybe I have to let this go. You see it now?
There we go. Yep.
There we go. Okay, I had to let it go. But anyway, so this is pretty cool. Here we go. It'll go up the track.
Wow.
Is that wild? So here they pull a box off the shelf. So this is Bionic Hive. I think this is a neat idea. And then they carry it down the hall. So that's kind of cool. Now, how do I get this out of here? Just drag it off. All right, there. Now you can see this again. So I mentioned that, but the issue is single page website. They are a startup, and they do not sell their equipment. They rent it. Yeah, they lease it, and they're in Israel. So the issue that I had with that is I said, right, they're not going to do a proof of concept for you. So instead, I would recommend the little AGCs. And then I said also, if you have to automatically load and unload the carts, right, you have the ability to pull them out of the freezer, unload them right there, send the conveyor, overhead conveyor, over to the lidding, banding, inspection, palletizing area. So that's this area. They just manually put lids on them. I see stacks of boxes in the back of the room, and I know they have at least one line that brings boxes to the area, but I didn't see it here. So there's lots of opportunities for automation here. Palletizing, right? You can just use a standard palletizer. Top tier is very popular. I work on those a lot. And then I did a summary, and I kind of wiped all this out, and I put this all on the website, right? And then you can see here, like this discusses the difficulty of driving the carts under the AGCs under the carts, because you can't go from the end. You see the wheels. So they would have to be narrower than the wheels, or you'd have to put legs on them or something. So they fill these freezers front to back. So there's a lot of challenges. And again, I spent one day, I spent 2 hours out here, and I talked to the guy, and it turned into this study. And then I said, here's the next steps. And this was something, again, Doug's mentioned, rough order of magnitude quote. You're going to need to get things like AGVs, conveyors, robots, overall pricing for some of that. You could do that to evaluate, is this feasible? You know, is this $10 million, or is this $4 million, or is this $1 million? You know, what can we do for the different prices? So this is very generic, and this is what the first episode of Mastering the Machine is that. So, and I did a 40-minute video. I allowed this to be downloaded. This is a generic analysis. I've removed customer names and things, and it's a PDF that you can download from the site. And that's kind of where everything was at. So that's the course or series. And with that, I'm going to move on to Doug. Doug is a senior applications engineer, since retired from Wright Industries, but still does other work, right? So, and he's right now, I didn't know all this about you, Doug, inventor on this patent and author of Chairborne Rangers. I was in the Chair Force. So the U.S. Chair Force. So this would mean something to me, right? And then Lessons of Automation, for those of you who know about my blog, Doug was my guest blog author in 2012 when I went to Central America. I had a midlife crisis, and instead of getting a red Ferrari or a toupee, I went to Central America and backpacked for a month through 7 countries. And while I was gone, Doug put 5 different articles, Lessons of Automation 1 through 5. Some of the stories are very sad stories of the demise of certain automation companies and that sort of thing. So I didn't know that about you, Doug, but I got this off the internet. So if there's something that is incorrect about it, of course, Doug can tell us. Introduction of the NIH RADx program. This relates to COVID, as everything does nowadays, right? We're all in the middle of the pandemic. They launched the Rapid Acceleration of Diagnostics Initiative, Speed Innovation. Accurate, fast, and easy to use, widely acceptable testing. And then Doug provided these pictures, and I will let you take over at this point, Doug.
Oh, okay. Well, Frank, first, thank you for having me attend. This to me looks like a great forum to share industry experience and, you know, things that have been done that are available to share that aren't confidential. And it also affords me a chance to perhaps mentor some of the younger people coming in through this forum. Usually when we have the opportunity to mentor others, we personally get more out of it than the people that we're mentoring. So I really enjoyed doing that. The indication that Frank was giving to you was a appropriation from Congress that was done on the initial authorization for COVID relief and the stimulation package that was given out, where we all initially got that $2,000. At that time, they had, the National Institute of Health created this RADx program, RADx program, with $1.5 billion in their budget. And And essentially what they have is a program where companies that can produce rapid test kits for detecting COVID-19, they will actually fund that company purchasing all of the automation equipment. There's a WP1 program you go through and then a WP2. What you're seeing on the screen right now is, oh, and I'm sorry, in addition to NIH, also BARDA, B-A-R-D-A, which was from Health and Human Services, has a bucket of money. And DARPA, D-A-R-P-A, which is DOD, has a bucket of money. So it's actually more closer to $3 billion that's available right now for companies to go out and purchase automation equipment. And it has to be automation equipment for a couple of reasons. Number one, the quality requirements that are there. And number two, the quantities that they're asking for in these items are just something that you could not sustain. For COVID-19, there's presently two different types of test kits. The first one's called a RNA or a PCR. It's a molecular test. And that's what you see on the right side there. That's the commercially available product from Abbott. It's called ID Now. And that's the one that's been used most to date because it's the most sensitive and it's the most accurate. The issue with it is that once you go to a test site and you provide saliva and it's sent to the lab, the turnaround time is almost 2 weeks. So you get tested and you don't get the results back during a period of time that you could be out there and you could be contaminating others. So NIH really wanted a rapid test, something that could be done at a physician's office, or even going farther, could be available over the counter as a point of care device that you could purchase at a pharmacy and you could test yourself. And that's what you see on the left. That's the second type of test kit. It's actually an antigen test. It's called Binox Now, and it's a lateral flow test. You can see on the lower left, there's actually a reagent strip that's in that card. And so when you apply saliva to the card, the saliva flows across the strip, there's reagents on it. It is very much like a pregnancy test. There's two bars on it that'll change colors. And in less than 5 minutes, you have it in your hand and you know if you've got antigens, which would indicate that you've been infected with COVID. The initial order, just to give you some order of magnitude, with Abbott on that particular one was NIH and the government purchased 150 million of those test kits at $5 a piece. So their first order was $750 million. It was followed up immediately by an order from the Gates Foundation, and they purchased $200 million worth of product. And so you can see that it scales up very quickly. In addition to the test cards, and I can also say that there's probably at least 8 different companies that are using the technologies that they have to produce a point of care test kit for COVID. So from the opportunities within industrial automation for automation, it's a huge market right now. And in addition to the kits, there's also things that go with it. There's the saliva collection devices. If you're dealing with the vaccine itself, obviously there's syringes. Yesterday, our new President Biden, one of the 10 executive orders that he signed was an executive order allocating the defense industry to get involved with the test kits and the syringes and the delivery devices to up the availability of these products and rapidly get them in the hands of people. The only way we're going to get out of COVID until the vaccines get up to about 80% is just to continuously test people. And even with the vaccines available, we don't know if those vaccines are going to be good for a 2-year period, a 1-year period. So the testing is going to have to continue. So when it comes to having opportunities like this, In automation, obviously, most of the systems integrators kind of have vertical markets. A lot of the systems integrators got started as small companies. They were primarily tool and die companies. Someone came to them and said, hey, can you, in addition to building that tool and die, can you automate some of this? And they started getting into automation, and they grew out of that. They were privately held companies. They were fun companies. You worked hard, you played hard, but they were niche markets. You know, this company might be real good at material handling. This other company might have been really good in automotive. In the late 1980s, a lot of the companies started to look at diversification, so that if your niche is in automotive or your niche is in e-commerce, obviously those are cyclic markets, so they're real busy one year, but the following year might not be busy. So what can you do in your business to supplement that, to kind of balance it out? And they started looking at different markets to go after. And healthcare or life sciences, however you want to phrase it, was one that a lot of people started going after. And they went after it from two different areas. One is the automated assembly area, which would be like your disposables. And the other was from the process perspective. The process perspective would be like making the vaccines themselves. When you first get into those industrial markets, you really need to understand the arena around those markets. I mean, building something for automotive in an automated assembly process is not like building something for healthcare. Most of the healthcare applications, whether it be diabetic test strips or insulin injection pens, are huge quantities. So the lines that are producing them, like on an insulin pen, are generally running at a rate of 200 parts per minute or better. The very fast lines, and the lines have to be constructed and implemented around FDA validation protocols and the AMP5 model. So for example, at every step that you assemble something, you have to verify that assembly. So if you put an adhesive down, you generally have to have a fluorescence in that adhesive, and the next step you have to have a camera sitting there that verifies that that adhesive has been applied and across the surface area in the volume it should, before you can put another part on it, verify it, to perhaps take it into UV curing. So it takes a little bit different kind of skill set to do that and to understand that market, but it's not something that can't be learned. And so you have to have things like that available to you to show people so that they can pick them up and move quickly. And that's where this slide comes into play, where Frank's got reference what's in your toolbox. These programs generally come in two different fashions. What's called the traditional program, where you might be working with a large supplier of medical devices, and they've got a huge resources in terms of staffs and so forth. And they write a very descriptive user requirement specification, and they send that out to multiple vendors. And the multiple vendors then have a process that they go through in responding. I personally don't like those applications because everybody's quoting to the same thing. It really limits your creativity, and it limits the ability for you, via your proposal, to write the specification. There's other non-traditional applications that come to you, and that's what a lot of this COVID work is, where NIH is looking for concepts in rough order of magnitude pricing so that they can submit through the approval processes, and if it's approved and the money's approved, to go back and generate a user requirement specification and go out and get formal bids. And with a rough order of magnitude, you don't have the time that you might normally have on a traditional automation application. You don't have 3 weeks to do a proposal. You usually got 3 or 4 days, but you still have to develop a concept. You still generally don't even have a specification. You generally don't have drawings. You can't even do tolerance stack-ups and analysis. So you really have to develop a concept, put some pricing together quickly, and you avoid doing traditional things like RIC analysis and cycle time charts and so forth. But it shows that you can be responsive. And one of the ways that, just my personal experience from the applications perspective, when it comes down to winning work, whether it be traditional or non-traditional, there's generally four things. It's the relationship, the concept that's developed to respond to the application, the price, and the delivery. If you don't have a relationship with the customer, you're just another person bidding, and it's going to come down to price. And those are not the kind of applications you want your company to be into. You want to be able to sell something for a respectable margin, and you want to have something that you feel comfortable with. So when you get the application for the rough order of magnitude or a fixed price quotation, you want to be engaged. You don't want to be afraid to pick up the phone every day and talk to the customer, run concepts in front of them. Hey, what do you think about doing it on this platform versus this platform? What kind of skill sets do you have at your facility? So if I do this 6-axis robot, do you have people locally that can support that, or should I do something simpler? And by engaging the customer, you're building that relationship. They'll coach you. They'll tell you what they're looking for so that your proposal is more to what they're looking for. And it takes the price issue out. You can generally be 10 to 15% higher than your competition, but they'll go to bat for you because you've built that relationship and you've got the best concept to address their situations. I'll give you a little story here that's kind of interesting. Next week, when Frank goes down here, his guest in this is going to be Jeff Buck, and he's going to talk about the controller that was developed for a company called Valve. Yeah, that's where you go. So the story behind that is I was in San Jose. We were at Google, and we were doing work for Google on Google Glass and doing the optical alignment for the prisms that were in Google Glass and aligning them and putting adhesive on them and then curing that adhesive. And it was a Friday afternoon about 3 o'clock, and I got a call that said, hey, can you run over to Milpitas? They got a customer over there that's got this application that needs to be developed immediately. So I went over to Milpitas. I sat in the lobby for an hour and a half. The gentleman never showed up, so I went back to the hotel, and I got a call and said, oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't see you, but we need you to have this quote. We need a quote within a week. So what happened was in gaming, PC gaming, Dell Computer had come out with a computer. It's a real high-end computer that was going to be specifically marketed towards the PC gaming industry. But they didn't have a game controller, and they did not want to use a controller from Xbox or some other company that's on the market. So Valve, which is a privately owned company based in Seattle, and Valve is a software company. They generate the games that people play on PCs. But they also have a really neat business model in that through Steam, which is their operating system, it's much like iTunes, which Apple did. You can go to their website and you buy from their website what other developers might have developed that run on Steam for PC games, and they get 30%. So you go to their website and download something a game that Frank developed, and Valve makes money off of that. And they continuously run that. But they were very interested in developing this game controller because they saw it as similar to the Microsoft model, an opportunity for them to get into hardware as well as just be a software company and a web-based area that you can buy stuff from. The unfortunate thing was this was early February. They wanted to be in production by August. so that they could produce 200,000 game controllers a month in time for the Christmas launch. They had, the controller wasn't designed. The gentleman called me at the hotel, apologetic for not being able to meet with me, and he sent me a 6-page PowerPoint that had some basic illustrations of this controller. No drawings, no specifications. The only specification they had was, we need to be in production in August to meet this delivery so that we can launch by Christmas. And we haven't designed the product yet. So what can you do to help us? So I took the stuff back the following Wednesday to Nashville. We whiteboarded it, put a group together. We come up with some concepts and some ideas based upon the limited information we had. We put a proposal together that was roughly about $6 million. It was a rough order of magnitude price. And we flew to Seattle the following Monday and presented it. So we went into Valve in the morning, we presented it. They would give us more details. They'd ask for more. We'd go back to the hotel room that evening, go into the conference room, redo the quotation. We did that for 5 straight days. So we started out with $6 million on the proposal. On Friday, the final proposal that we put together was $13 million. They gave us a purchase order, and they wired us 25% of the money right then and there on the spot. Now we had a problem. How do you produce this equipment when they don't even have their product designed? So we started building platforms that we could quickly release that weren't tooled. And as they developed things, like as they developed the PC board that did the circuits and such, then we would tool the platforms based upon that. It was a concurrent operation. As they were designing the controller, we were designing the automation to build the controller and test it. It's got 100% testing. We got halfway through it, and knowing that we weren't going to meet the dates to do the Christmas launch because they couldn't finish their design. I mean, like testing, for example, testing that we were doing on this was you had to take the controller and put it in a gallon Ziploc bag, fill that up with Cheeto dust, and shake it and throw it against the couch, because that's what gamers apparently do. They're eating Cheetos as they're gaming, and it's getting in the keys and it's sticking to the keys. So that was just some of the testing that we were going through. And in addition to that, while we were building that, they came to us and said, hey, we have another product, this is Valve again, that we want you to design and build, and it's a link box, so that essentially, if you've got your man cave and all your buddies come over to do the gaming, you can stream your PC and your man cave to your 70-inch high-definition television in the living room, and you can play there with it. So they gave us an order to build that link box as well. At the end, it represented almost $30 million worth of revenue for us. There were constant change orders, constant weekly engineering change orders. The folks at Wright Industries did a fantastic job from a project management perspective. Just keeping, an open issues list up to date and discussing with the customer. And as they started developing their designs, what had to change in the tooling, and it was very, very complicated, automated assembly and 100% testing. There's a dongle that comes in at the end. You have to marry that dongle to the controller. You then have to do 100% testing. So we had 124 Scaro robots and I think about 25 6-axis robots on the line. And we built the entire line, we ran the line off, and we installed it at a contract manufacturer facility in Buffalo Grove, Illinois. Both the controller and the link box line. And it 100% did the assembly testing and packaging all the way through palletizing. So we addressed a lot of the things that Frank showed you on the application he's currently working in the food industry. These things came out, they were on a pallet, they were boxed with the literature, shrink wrapped, ready to go to shipment. And next week, Jeff Buck was one of the contractors through Automation Inc. was one of the contractors that Wright Industries contracted with for additional resources from a controls perspective. They had, I think, 4 or 5 people in our facility assisting with the controls. It was a Rockwell automation-based control platform on each of the independent control stations that did the assembly, and using Beckhoff HMIs, and using Beckhoff with Cognex Vision Pro for the vision, any area that there was vision involved, like where we took the flex circuits and we had to plug them into the PCB. It was all vision guided in getting the flex circuit plugged in and bent, and then the adhesive around it. So we used Beckhoff PCs with Cognex Vision Pro and high resolution cameras to achieve that. But again, that all started with, I wouldn't even call it a ROM, it was more of a swag, where we just gave them some idea of what the pricing was going to be. And then we fine-tuned it once we went out there to get to the fixed price quotation. And it's very important, in my opinion, that your organization is able to do these rough order of magnitudes, and for 2 reasons. Specifically in healthcare, it all gets down to the piece part pricing. The insurance companies will mandate what their reimbursements will be. So if you're a diabetic and you're using the test strips to daily test yourself, the insurance companies are going to mandate what they'll pay for those test strips. So the challenge to the manufacturer of that test strip is, how do I produce them in high volumes in order to get the margins that I want to achieve? So if you go to them with a rough order of magnitude and they do the math on it, it comes down to that their margins are only going to be 20% based on the depreciation of the automatic equipment. The project just won't go forward. The return is not there on the investment. And by doing that rough order of magnitude and qualifying it with them to see if it's going to go forward, you don't spend a lot of your company's time and money and efforts doing the things that you would do in a normal fixed price quotation. You're qualifying the application for your company. You're doing it in a quick period of time. And rough order of magnitudes are generally plus or minus 20%. We also do a lot of budgetary proposals where you might have a preliminary specification, but you don't have all the detail that's necessary to do a fixed price quotation. And budgetary prices will have, or budgetary quotations will have a higher level of detail in it. You'll start doing risk analysis. You'll start doing a detailed written proposal. You'll start doing timing charts. You'll start interfacing more with vendors to check on lead times and prices. And it's generally something that's plus or minus 10%. And it then would be the next step is where you'd actually do a firm fixed price quotation. The worst project that you could ever take in your company is a bad project. Having a bad project is worse than having no project. Nothing happens in the automation business until you sell something. So all the people in purchasing, all the people in engineering, all the people, the indirect and the direct people have nothing to do until something is sold. So from the application perspective, that's what your job is. Your job is to go out and win work. But that doesn't mean you want to give it away. You've got to win work where you clearly identified upfront where the risks are going to be to your company and what you're going to do to mitigate those risks. Maybe you insist on doing proof of principles on certain stations prior to moving forward with the formal equipment assembly and build. You've got to identify those risks, and you've got to identify for your company how you're going to mitigate those risks, so that you're assured that when you do sell something, it's going to be good work. It's not always going to hit the margins that you predict. Sometimes you're going to do better. Sometimes you're going to do worse. That's the nature of the business. But the worst thing you can do is take a job that's going to lose money. And in addition to losing money, you're tying up valuable resources that could be working on good work that would be earning good money. So that's a real quick 10,000-foot introduction to how applications are done. I'd be happy to deal on specifics or answer questions or show you examples of how we do timing charts and show you examples of how we do schedules. And making sure that schedules have the detail level in it that holds the customer accountable as well to providing product when they have to do, so that you can do your job and hit the dates that you've committed to, and share with you a lot of, I hate to call them exceptions and clarifications, but things that you want to address in your proposal that protects your company. Things that you state in there. For example, in a healthcare application, if you do have a user requirement specification, I generally insist on taking that user requirement specification and getting it in an Excel type of format and addressing every line use that user requirement. So that if they say cycle time has to be 6 seconds, you say agreed. Clarification, no, it's going to be 8 seconds, or you disagree, and you do it line item by line item by line item. And it's very clear to them then what you're agreeing to do. And that becomes the basis for developing the FRS as you're going through the design. So there's a lot of things in the healthcare, the GAMP5 model and things like that, that through Frank's efforts here with the Automation Academy, we'd be happy to share with you in the future and go into in more detail. Excuse me.
Well, so thanks, Doug. That is something we plan on doing, is extending this series. So the reason I titled this one Mastering the Machine is because a lot of people had questions about specifications, how do quotes work, how do people build machines in big companies and all that. And I wanted to find a way to kind of put everything together. So you mentioned, for instance, proof of principle machines. I remember we did some for Titan out in California. I was involved in some of that. And, we would build things that were probably not up to the quality of some of our finished products, but they worked and they showed the customer that it would operate, and they'd bring it in there and they'd run production on a very small scale, you know, using that machine for a while just to see how well it worked. Another thing, you mentioned the spreadsheets and the timing charts and all that. Those are, you know, a lot of those are just Excel forms that have some macros and some formulas and things built into it, but it goes into great detail, and some people may want to develop their own, right? Timing chart software or whatever. And of course you can buy this stuff online. We use Microsoft Project and all these that have Gantt charts and things that people can use. And I think they're selling some commercial timing chart software, but I remember J.R. Musselman developed some timing chart Excel spreadsheet stuff that was pretty cool, worked pretty well. But another thing I wanted to do is, since Doug mentioned the steam controller, I'm going to go ahead and show a video of that. This is pretty cool, and they put music to it, and the music actually goes pretty well with the steam controller. But this is, let's see if we can control that. There we go. Starting on the other page here, we'll drag it in.
Yeah, Valve had a really good internal marketing department that had capabilities in video. As this equipment was being assembled in Nashville, they actually came in and mounted cameras in the ceiling, and they were watching daily as this equipment was being built. And then afterwards, they created this video, and this is the installation at the contract manufacturer's facility in Buffalo Grove. But they created this video and put it out on YouTube to demonstrate their capabilities in producing these. And they went out and they bought all the injection molding machines. They bought all the molds. We built equipment for those keys. There's the PCB, and you can see put a handle on top of it. Those platforms, those rotary platforms you see there are servo-driven Weiss indexers. So we can program to be a 4-station or 8-position or 12-position, whatever is necessary. And they named each one of those scaras. If you look at those scaras when you're going through this again, there's names on each one of them, and those names are from some of the characters in their PC games that they developed. That's testing trackpads. That's testing the joystick. This is where it went into a box, and it mated with it came out of the box, then it was mated with the dongle. Then the finished product was put in these elevators and went over to packaging. You can see here the carton erecting. Then there's a sleeve that was put over the top of it. Frank mentioned Titan. That was a job we did, as you mentioned, we did a proof of principle, and it resulted in a contract that was exceeding $32 million. The first line was $8 million. We built that line. We won the line based upon the proof of principles. We built the line. I have videos of that we can share in future. But the whole line went into Abbott in Chicago and went into storage. And the next thing I knew about it, it was actually on eBay. They did their analysis of it and they couldn't make the margins that they needed. So they canceled the whole program, and that equipment got auctioned off. They never put it into production.
I remember some of that. I think that was close to when I left Wright Industries that happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this time lapse is pretty cool here of doing everything over the top. They did a great job on this video.
Yeah.
So I've seen a lot of comments on this line where this, I don't know if this is obsolete or not being used much anymore, or what?
Yeah, they got out of it. For whatever reason, they discontinued them. I don't know if Dell didn't go forward with their PC or whatever, but a lot of this got repurposed. Valve then had a agreement with HTC in purchasing in doing the VR platforms. And so we repurposed a lot of this equipment for virtual reality equipment, the headsets and the laser scanners that are put in the rooms. And the presses were used for injection molding and such. That equipment's running in Seattle presently.
Okay.
Yeah, if you look at the HTC Live, that's a Valve product as well.
So a lot of your tooling, of course, is not reusable, but the robots and the bases and yes, most of the stuff there, the conveyors, you know.
Yes, it could be repurposed.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah, one of the interesting things was Oculus, which is a competitor to HTC and VR. It was a three-man company, and they had a product as well doing VR. And before they even had a product, they just had an idea. They had drawings and stuff. Facebook bought them for $1 billion. And the reason behind it was Mark Zuckerberg was convinced that Facebook almost lost their company when they failed to make the transition from PCs to cell phones. And he saw virtual reality as being that next step. And he wanted to be involved with it. And so that's when Facebook made the commitment and purchased Oculus. And Oculus is doing some really nice stuff in VR right now if you go out and look at their stuff.
Struggling a lot here with getting these screens off. Sometimes when you maximize these things, they end up on the top of the screen and you can't grab the little bar and drag it anymore. There we go. So we've got that back, and I need to shut off the sound. Could you hear the music playing on that video? On the Steam controller video?
I didn't know.
Okay, it was playing on my end, but it didn't come across on the webinar. So that's interesting. Here we go. So I'm pulling all these things apart on the other page to get rid of the sound. There we go. So
any questions for them?
Well, so Phil left, and I see Lalit Pandey is on here. Do you have any questions, Lalit, or? I think that's the only other person on here. And of course, we do put this on YouTube, and people sometimes put questions and things like that on there. And we also save these in a webinars folder in the Automation Academy, so people can come back that are members and watch them as they need to. And I've put all the webinars on YouTube and made these open to everybody, because honestly, we've only got like 20 members right now in the Automation Academy. It's new. I just released it in November. It took me a lot longer to build it than it did to to kind of get it going. So we've been going since November 19th. It's pretty new. We got, Phil is a very regular member on there, and we've got a couple other people that, show up to these webinars and things. And then we've had a lot of people just off LinkedIn that have showed up. But today I only see Lalit and I saw Phil earlier. Now, the other thing is, of course, when people do show up, I've got to let them in. And so if I miss somebody while you're talking, a lot of times, they might not get in, but they may look later on the YouTube videos. As these become regular, I think more people will tune in. And this one was great, Doug. This, you told some great stories and, a lot of good detail about quoting. And I definitely want to revisit, some of those items later. How the spreadsheets work. How do we come up with pricing for all these things? What kind of investigation needs to be done and that sort of thing. So really important stuff. And that's the feedback I'm getting from the Automation Academy members, is that they want to know more about the process, how all this stuff works. How do you come up with your ideas? How do you prototype things? Of course. Okay, well, somebody's calling me on the other line there, but I'm just listening to that in the background. I hope it's not too loud here.
and share with them, we need to share with them as well. There's a lot of synergy. I mean, if the integrator that is participating here has a lot of background in automotive, there is synergy and things that they can repurpose and use it in their toolbox if they want to get into material handling, or they want to get into healthcare, they want to get into e-commerce. It's not completely separate vertical markets. There's a lot of stuff that you've already done that just needs to be repackaged, if you would, to meet those markets that can be reused and minimize your risk and make it faster to market.
Yeah, a lot of so the little exploratory thing I just got done. They have questions for me a lot of times, the members, and that's exactly the questions I answer. They say, well, where do you come up with the ideas for your solutions? And usually what I say is, well, you better already be familiar with the industry and how this stuff works. So in my case, the things that I had to know, right, was I had to know about the food service industry, right? It's FDA, there's some cleanliness things and what kind of materials to use. You have to know material handling. In the case of the picking up that soup and packing it, you needed to know, robotics. You need to know vision-guided robotics, and you need to know, can I locate all these packages and pick them up and figure out their center of gravity? And then also you need to know the speeds of things. So in this case, you look at these parts coming into the bath, and they're coming in at I think it's 45 per minute, which is only a little over a second, per part. Well, it doesn't look very fast when you see them on the front end, but on the tail end, they're dumping all those products out in a giant pile. So you've got to deal with the entire pile, right? You got to deal with all the products. And that's where, like you mentioned, the feasibility studies, the proof of principle would need to be done. Before a customer would buy something like that, especially on 6 different lines, they would need to see a robot picking those parts up fast enough to keep that up, or a pair of robots. So what I came up with was probably a pair of robots taking turns. And can they afford that, right? You got 2 robots dedicated to picking pretty inexpensive bags of soup across 6 lines. Is that going to justify, replacing a person? And honestly, they didn't say we have a lot of problem with the personnel on that part of the line. They had all the problem on pushing those big carts around, right? That was where they were really trying to save labor, and it wasn't even saving money on labor. They just said, we flat out, we can't get people hired on to do that. Nobody wants to push those carts around. We've used our resources in this town for doing that. So that's more important to pick those carts up and shove them in the freezers than it is to pack them with a robot. And so we'll see. So it's the ball's in their court, right? In this case, they need to come back and say, well, like Doug said, we have rough order of magnitude quote, we have budgetary quotes, and then we have fixed price. Well, you kind of need to first do a real swag and just say, how much do robots cost? Can we, you know, is it going to take 4 robots to do this? So we want to see a proof of principle, and they'll pay for stuff like that. One of my initial worries is I saw their website and I just thought, oh, well, this is a small company. Maybe it's in one location and they don't have the money to do this, right? They're not going to be able to afford a bunch of robots and things that it's going to take to do this. But after I visited them and I see a giant storage and retrieval system, and I see tons of freezer warehouse space and automated, you know, methods of getting things into frozen storage, I thought, well, they paid for that, you know, so maybe they can pay for studies with robots and things like that. So some of the things I mentioned in there, and this doesn't apply to companies like Wright Industries where we worked, but when you're a company and you're in a specific town and you want to do a proof of principle or you want to test things, if you can use your local resources to buy the system, you're not going to be paying for the travel, right, that it takes to ship stuff back and forth or put, you know, engineers in hotels or whatever. So that may be taken into account. And so those local companies that provide robots and vision guided robotics may get a better shot at it than a company like a Wright Industries, which is large. And, you know, I seem to remember you, Doug, mentioning something about charging for quotes, right? It costs $10,000 to put a basic quote together, and some customers probably got charged before you'd even quote them because maybe Wright might not take them seriously enough, right? Mm-hmm. This is not a realistic thing. So any feedback on that? Did Wright, a lot of the quotes, right, for the larger companies, probably you didn't charge for, but maybe the smaller companies, you would sometimes throw a price tag at them to see if they bite?
Yeah, we did a lot of that. Number one, from the IP perspective, obviously when you submit a proposal, you as a company who created that proposal retain the IP. Some companies say, no, we want your proposal, but we want the IP. So you say, that's fine. Then you're going to pay us to develop that because you want to take ideas out of that proposal and shop it or use it in other areas. So we would charge for proposal generation. And again, kind of getting back to the healthcare business, resources are very slim today. The companies just don't have, 100 people on staff anymore, and they'll pay you to write the URS, and they'll pay you to write the FRS, and they'll pay you to do the validation documentation because they just don't have people available to do it anymore. And again, it's not only a revenue stream for you, but when you're doing it, you can tailor it to your applications. So you're writing, you're doing this stuff around your designs rather than responding to something. So it puts you in control and you're getting compensated for it. And it also gives you a one-up. Again, if you're competing against somebody that is traditionally in the automotive industry and they're trying to go into the healthcare industry, by the ability to offer those services that somebody else might not be able to, again, allows you to charge more for your equipment.
Yeah, that's true. That's pretty much most of our time's up here. Again, Lalit, and somebody else came in for a little bit, Chad Barnes, I think his name was, and I kind of wrote that down. And then so usually this thing starts, of course, at 10 Central Time, 11 Eastern, and sometimes people miss it by an hour and they come in right at the tail end of it, which I guess that's probably going to be a common thing. So, and I even see notifications. I'll be 2 hours later and somebody will log in and they'll say, somebody has entered your Zoom meeting room. And it's like, oh, well, sorry about that. But anyway, you can all watch this, of course, on YouTube. I do post the link. We have a Facebook group, and it is called the Automation Academy, just like this. We got 3,200 members there. As far as I know, very few of them are members of the actual Automation Academy, but I do throw the link to the video out there. And then I've got about 2,500 LinkedIn connections, and I throw this out there also. And so people have the opportunity to go back and look at these videos on YouTube. I just stick them out there for free. But of course, my motivation is to have people come and join the Automation Academy. Hey, you can get in for $9.99 a month. That's pretty cheap. And then for some of the more premium courses, it's $29.99 a month, but all you can eat, right? And there's a bunch of courses on there on Siemens and Allen Bradley and Omron, and gonna be some machine vision stuff and panel building stuff. And of course now the Mastering the Machine course, which has its first video up there, which is 40-minute video with a bunch of questions answered at the end. And I update these things. So the next module in that will be something about probably some of the things that Doug has mentioned here. You know, how do we get into these, you know, rough order magnitude quotes and budgetary quotes. So I've done the before the quote module, and then we'll be getting into, okay, now what, right? So in the case of my customer out here, that's exactly what it is. Now what? Here's a bunch of options. Which one are you going to choose to investigate? Because investigation costs money. And like Doug said, intellectual property costs money, right? And me throwing conveyors out there and robots, that's pretty easy to figure out. But when it comes down to the actual layout and the pricing, that's worth something. And we're going to get into more of that later. As I mentioned, the next webinar is February 5th. We do these every 2 weeks. Jeff Buck will be the guest. He is from Automation NTH. He's going to talk about his company and what they do, and probably mention the steam controller. But that, honestly, like Doug said, that was a subcontract job. So he was working for Wright Industries, you know, sending his people in that. But they do a lot of things on their own too. They've done some vision guided motion picking printer cartridges. That's pretty neat. So you go out to their place and they identify all the printer cartridges. They use some of the newer Cognex vision techniques. They have some new platforms, and he'll probably talk about that also. But I've got a kind of a long relationship with NTH and Doug and Wright and all these people. So that will probably be a theme coming back up. And Doug, I would love to have you back anytime because you know so much cool stuff. And, you know, that's, let me see, I'm going to stop the screen share and we'll all get on here. See, there's a third person kind of down here. But I would definitely love to have you back and maybe make this a kind of a regular thing. It's not anything that has to be too serious. Like I said, I just run it every couple of weeks. This is the 9th one. So I did 4 in August, and they were all on kind of PLC programming kind of topics. And then I've done, this is the 5th since then, since the Automation Academy opened. We do it every 2 weeks since November so far. And hopefully, hey, a year from now, maybe we'll still be doing it. That's the general idea.
Hope so.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. And for those of you, Lalit, you stuck the whole time. You were here the whole time. That's cool. You checked it out. I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting. Last minute, no questions. Nobody else logged in. Okay, well, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
All right. Thanks, Doug.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.